Welcome to Teaching Liberty. I'm Stephanie Edmonds, creator of Teaching Liberty, and today I'm here to have a conversation with Lacey. She is a certified herbalist and CPT, which you're going to have to tell me what that is. But before we introduce her officially, I want to remind everybody you can go over to teachingliberty.org and become a member today because liberty is not free. We have to support the content creators we love. So go in, join over there, support what we're doing here, and also like this button, leave us a comment down below, all that good stuff. All right, now that I got that out of the way, Lacey's got that drinking. That's always clutch.
Yes,
Go ahead, introduce yourself. Tell the people who you are, and what you're all about.
sure. Hi, guys. So I'm Lacey. I've been a part of the health field for over 10 years. So by CPT, a lot of my education actually started in more anatomy, physiology, and exercise science. And I kind of switched gears over the years and got very, very deep into clinical herbal medicine as well as other
Mm,
aspects of naturopathic medicine. So I've definitely been all around the field. I've been able to work with and learn from a lot of really great people from all aspects and
right.
corners. And
And I think that gives you a really good perspective too, right? Because you can look at things from the more, I guess you can say, like, Western way of things. I was gonna say traditional, but that's, traditional Western way versus the, like, traditional holistic way, I guess, which is most more associated with Eastern medicine. So
yeah,
you kind of have both perspectives, and I think there is value in both perspectives, right?
oh yeah,
I think that as we're going to kind of talk about today, specifically in the context of women's reproductive health and the birth control pill, right? The pill, that we're going to be talking a lot about how Western medicine has gone too far and how
hmm
the balance is kind of off. Right. But that's not to say that there is no value in it in all. I think that we've made significant advances and done great things for humanity with it. But it's just about sort of saying, all right, what's the balance do we want
yes,
here?
yes, absolutely. And more recently, I've really taken the turn and been focusing on women's health based on my own recovery and my experience in how Western medicine has failed me, especially as a woman. So
Okay, so
I
yeah,
think,
tell me a little bit more about that story, what you feel comfortable sharing.
of
I know
course,
personally for me too, I recently stopped taking the pill. I wasn't necessarily experiencing any symptoms in particular, but just with everything that's kind of unfolded over the past 2 years, and then just thinking about, like, well, I never really had informed consent, and I never really realized there were all these side effects, and just like the food that I'm eating, and it's not until you stop eating it and really do an assessment of things that you realize, maybe that thing was impacting me. So I'm actually on month 2 of not taking the birth control pill after taking it, I mean, more or less for the past decade, except for the period when I had my son.
hmm and how have you been feeling since then? Do you feel like your body is having a different experience?
It's so hard to tell because I'm also doing some stuff with my diet at the same time. So, like, I'm not doing things in isolation. I would say I definitely feel like I would forget to take my pill, so then I would, like, catch up, and I would remember to take it because I could, like, feel it. I'd be like, "Oh, like, there's something going on, like, in my ovaries or something here, like, let me go take my pill." And so I don't have sort of, like, that daily experience with, like, my ovaries now, which I don't know which is good or bad, but, it has changed, I guess, like, either I believe it's probably, like, my ovulation period, right?
hmm
It's like, the my cramping experience has been different, and then my experience with my period has been different. So I don't know, yeah, too much information here for people, but, uh,
Not at
yeah,
all.
yeah, yeah, so I can't, like I said, I never really felt like I had a lot of severe symptoms. I know a lot of people, like, will gain weight. I know people who've had seizures and things like that. I don't feel like I necessarily experience or mood swings like that. Again, it's really just hard to tell because I'm doing diet things, and also I'm just, like, in a highly stressful situation. I feel like right now with, like, the mandates and I have a job and this and that. So
Yeah.
I can't make any grand conclusions, but I would at least just like to get to the place where I have a clean slate, I can do research, and I can make a true informed, consent decision.
Yes, absolutely. And it's amazing how smart our bodies are. And I think that's a good point because when there isn't consent, whether it's about the chemicals in our food or contraceptive pills, we really don't have an understanding of like how detrimental these things could be affecting us, or even the most minuscule ways they could be affecting us that kind of fly over our radar. And as far as informed consent with the pill, I think it's important to remember like how this is marketed, right? So the pill is really marketed on convenience and preventing conception.
Well, that's
And
why I wanted it.
yeah, but
Pretty
that's it.
convenient
They
to
don't.
prevent conception too.
Right. And there's not an adequate education at all about potential side effects, potential long-term effects. Um, and I think that is something that is perpetuated by how certain sexual education programs in schools have actually failed us for generations.
Mhm.
I think that's where it starts because there's so many innate aspects of womanhood and being secular that are not we're just not given the information that we should be. We're told, okay, you're bleeding now. You might have PMS. You can get pregnant if you have sex. That's it. If you're
And
moody,
here's
it's your
here's
hormones.
this thing to sop it up. Here's this pad.
Yeah.
Pads, by the way, are disgusting. Can I just share that
Mm.
I hate pads. I mean, I don't know how women dealt with it back in the day, like, more power to all them. I guess they had rags and stuff. It sounds awful, but
Yeah. But you know what? And that too is a good point because it has also perpetuated a disconnect from some of the most primal and instinctual aspects of womanhood that can affect everything from our creativity, our intuition as far as relationships with people or choosing a partner, our relationship with that essence of motherhood, even for women who don't want to be moms. And I think that's kind of where my story started. I had never wanted to be a mom, but it perpetuated a major disconnect. So, I was on birth control for probably about 5, 6 years. I started when in my late teens. And at the time, that was considered a very responsible thing to do to prevent conception at the time. But I was definitely not equipped with understanding my body as a woman. And it's interesting how years later, I think I'm like 6, 7 years into my recovery post contraceptives. And there's still so many things I'm healing, and not just physical, but mental and emotional as well. And I do like to stress the point that for even, for any women who are listening who are looking to prevent conception or they aren't interested in being motherhood, that has nothing to do with the connection and relationship you can have with your cycle and your womb. And the stronger that connection is, you will see so much health and abundance happen in your life. Now, when I had started birth control, as a teenager, in hindsight, I was immediately perpetuated into having a lot of issues with my emotional and mental stability. And at the time, it was very much written off as this is just teenage angst, this
mm,
is just growing pain. And meanwhile, I was having, panic attacks for the first time in my life. I was very confused with myself emotionally. And being a very sensitive person, I mean, I get it, but I had never experienced anything like it. And not once did any, doctor, OBGYN in the course of those few years talk to me about mental health, emotional health, cycle tracking, or anything else related to my period and cycle.
right, and nobody thought to question, like, "Oh, maybe it's like we're manipulating her estrogen," or I mean, and whatever else it does, and maybe that could have an impact on the way that, your emotions fluctuate because, uh, what are they called? Like, estrogen
Progesterone,
and yeah,
estrogen.
all those
Yeah.
things, those are highly influential in your mood, right?
Yes.
And that is why, like, when you are on your period, like, there PMS is, like, a thing, you know what I mean? Like, it's like a natural thing that sort of happens, and, like, also, like, when if you, like, have a baby and then, like, post like, that it messes with your emotions a lot for sure, and women, I think for a lot of those reasons, tend to be the more emotional gender of the 2, right? Not always, on a spectrum, all right? Don't
Right.
come at me, guys.
Right. No,
But
but it's true. It's true. And funny enough, this was happening, and in a parallel, I was in school and I was learning, about psychological health, physiology, and all that. And I was also an athlete at the time. So my actual OBGYN practitioner was a woman who had worked with a number of professional female athletes. And this was somebody who, as a very young woman, felt that I could trust based on my lifestyle and my goals at the time. Now,
what
something
was
that
your
also happened
sport?
to me, what?
What was your big sport?
Bodybuilding.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. As a teenager?
Yeah.
Was
So
it
I
a
started
thing?
really training around like probably 17, 18, and I was competing until my early 20s.
Oh, okay, okay. So, like, I was like, bodybuilding in high school, I was like, "That's the thing." So, but it was, like, late high school into okay, cool. Alright,
Yeah.
awesome.
And interesting enough, I was also learning about a lot in that whole perspective of athletics. And it's funny because, and this has happened, and I've talked to a lot of women, this has happened, that they do lose their period on certain contraceptives. Now, at the time, not being educated about this enough, I looked at that as something that was very convenient for me.
Mm,
And interestingly, years later, by time I really started putting the pieces together, and I was like, this isn't convenient. This isn't natural. If I'm young, if I'm healthy, if I have somebody in this field of health and I take great care of my body, why is that missing? Now, it can happen sometimes naturally in women who are very highly athletic due to low body fat, but this was entirely different scenario.
right, which also isn't necessarily good for long periods of time.
Yes.
I do like that, like, okay, if you are more, like, if you move more and you're more athletic and stuff, like, you can also just, like, at least, like, lessen your period and stuff. It
Yes.
depends also, like, for some people, that's not the same. But
Right.
it's not good for it to go away for, long periods of time either.
Right, because under the radar, that is actually a survival tactic for our
Right.
biology. And when I started learning about that, it made me realize too that this pill can be very dangerous because it's perpetuating the body into a fight or flight response. Now,
Mhm.
when this happens, even in the healthiest of people, and this might be helpful information for those of you trying to conceive, it can be very, very difficult to do so because your nervous system is under a lot of stress. And this can display itself very differently. Typically, if you're not getting your period, it could be a sign that your body's saying, our environment is not safe to conceive and carry a baby.
Mm.
So, that
Right,
stress
if
on the
you're not
nervous,
getting enough nutrients, right? It's not
right?
good.
You're not getting enough nutrients, or there's something being manipulated in your hormones. And another thing that a lot of people don't know about the birth control pill, again, back to informed consent, a lot of them are classified similarly to steroids and
Mm.
how they affect the body. And when I talk to women about this, a lot of them are like mind blown because when you think about a steroid, you're not usually thinking about birth control. You're thinking about, certain athletes, and you're thinking about, sports kind of related things.
Right, if you have, like, inflammation or whatever, like, oftentimes it helps,
Yes.
like, it go down, or, like, if you get, like, strep throat, you'll get a steroid to help put down the
Yes.
swelling.
Yes, and all of these have a huge effect on our endocrine system and our hormone production. So, if we think about long term, I'm saying long term, I would say anything over than 6 months, I would consider long term as far as
Right,
something like a state of that the body is in or something that it's
right,
being affected by. That fight or flight on your nervous system can be very, very damaging and can take a very, very long time to recover. But, once again, they marketed on the convenience of it.
right,
They're
yeah,
not talking to you about the long term effects.
right. No, I that's definitely, what you think about as a young woman, right? Like,
Mhm.
you don't
You just
wanna
wanna
have
be safe.
right, you wanna be safe, right? That's how they sell it to you, be safe, you don't wanna have a kid, right? You wanna on to get your education and your career, and then, like, be able to choose when, very specifically when you want to have a kid. Um,
Mhm.
so it's definitely one of those tough places where, it'll be like, well, the responsibility falls down on the woman. basically than without it. So you could this whole feminist territory, but I have split thoughts on that.
Right.
So, but I think at least it starts with having a real conversation, right? People really have to know how these drugs impact them, and I think that that's kind of like big pharma's like play in general. I mean, that's a lot of people's plays. Like they play on what you don't know. And
Exactly.
and then in a lot of circumstances, it's like, whatever, it's harmless, right? Like, you buy some stupid thing that ends up on a shelf that you don't use, like but in the
Right.
case when it's, like, things that you're putting into your body and it's like, it doesn't just end up on some shelf, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's like it can impact your state of mind, and I especially think too, like, we have this mental health crisis that's going on right now, and everybody's reaction is, "Oh, we need to have better mental health awareness, like, we need to have this, like, social emotional program, we need to have this, we need to have that," and, that stuff is good and well, there probably is a place for it, some of it's probably, like, fluffy stuff they're just wrapping in a shiny package and trying to sell it to you, some of it's
Right.
probably but I also don't think that that gets to the root of any of this stuff, right?
Exactly. What's the source? What is that doing to
Right.
help us reveal the source so we can actually establish something to improve it,
Mhm.
like generationally? And I'm so glad you said too, with birth control, a lot of responsibility falls on our women. And I think it's true. There's a lot of pressure about that. And it leads back to, okay, well, where has education and resources failed us as women and literally failed generations of women that
Right.
we're having these
They want us to be
conversations?
men. It's almost like they want us to be men, right? It's like, "Okay, take this pill so that you can go off and work and you can go off and do these things because it's not fair. It's not fair that you have to stay home and you're not valued and you're not this." Like, I almost think that that's like a really big propaganda campaign, right?
Yes.
Like, it's not that women's work isn't valued, right? It's just that woman's work is different and it's valued in a different way, and woman's value is different. Like, it doesn't need to be valued in the same way as a man's work to be valuable. And so I
Yes.
think that's something that we need to unlearn.
Yes. And it's so interesting too, because if you look at other cultures and how they handle educating the women in those cultures about their bodies and the different processes they have to either prepare them or comfort them or celebrate them or even accommodate them. I think we're kind of very backwards with that. We do not have a medical system that accommodates women. I mean, the amount of women that I speak to who are not taken seriously about their health, whether it's physical or mental or emotional or reproductive, is absolutely unnecessary. It's a shame. It's a shame. Whether
Alright,
it's
but let me say this, right? So, in the pandemic, there was, like, this thing about long COVID. And then on Twitter, it kind of, like, developed this joke, like, "Tell me you had long COVID, and I'll show you a woman with, like, Hershey in her bio who's in her 40s and doesn't have anything to do." Like, it was like this, like, stereotype of a person who would claim that they had long COVID, that kinda seemed to develop, and it was a certain, like, female archetype, basically. It's, like,
huh,
kinda
I didn't see this.
young, middle-aged, and, may or may not have kids, but lonely maybe or needs just, he, she, the virtue signal thing going on. And I feel like that does happen, right? And one of the other things that I'll question is sometimes what's that one where it's like you feel pain all over your body? Talking about?
Like a hypochondriac kind of
No,
thing?
not a hypoco but it's like they sell you a pill for it. There's like Lyrica and like that's like one of these pills. I forget what it's called. Oh.
Like nervous system or something like
Yeah, it's
that?
like a nervous system thing and like, women a lot it's like the same kind of woman who will claim that they have it, but nobody can ever really figure out what's going on with them.
Mhm.
But I do believe probably there is something going on with them, right? Like because like I feel like we often discredit the fact like if somebody's like at least having like some psychological thing, maybe there is something going on with their body. It probably has to do with your diet or maybe it has to do with something. So we
Right.
need to, I think that the problem with Western medicine is it try to like isolates and it looks at like this causes this, rather than taking a more systematic view and saying, okay, we have a whole system here that's working, right?
Yes. Yes, and we have to think about this, the body system working in harmony. And reproductive health is a major indicator for the overall health of somebody's body. And not just even with fertility. And like I said, you know, I was alienated because I didn't think that I wanted to be a mother. So it further disconnected me from my reproductive health and even
Mhm.
just my cycle and that womanly instinct. But this is an important thing to consider because when you're manipulating hormones, you're affecting your nervous system, you're affecting your endocrine system, and all those chemicals in your body are no longer properly regulating your mood. They're no longer properly regulating even your perception on certain things. So, and I recently had another conversation with somebody, but some of these contraceptives, when you are altering your hormones, and I know a lot of women who have had this experience. They've gotten off the pill and they've actually realized that they were not happy with certain relationships or certain friendships or certain jobs, and their entire lives were not even aligning with what they really needed or wanted in their soul, back to that disconnect. And I guess that kind of sounds like it's more on a spiritual level, but when you do think of the body as this interconnected, beautifully, divinely, designed thing, it makes a lot of sense. It makes so much sense. I had so many issues with my anxiety on the pill, and it was always treated as a separate thing. No, never
Right.
once did a doctor say, maybe your nervous system is being flooded, and because your body can't properly regulate hormones, your body's not detoxing estrogen properly, your
Mm.
progesterone levels aren't rising properly, maybe you're not even ovulating. Not one of them ever made that connection or even suggested it as far as my mental health.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because you've been brought up to believe you go to the doctor, the doctor's gonna tell you what's right and what's wrong. And now I'm questioning that whole thing. Like, I'm questioning, like, do I really need to go to the doctor? Like, I feel good. Like, I eat healthy. I feel good. Like, I don't have any, issues going on. Like, why should I go to the doctor?
Mhm.
So that's kind of like what my mindset is. But at the same time, like, if you're not going to do that, you also need to be educating yourself. And I think putting yourself in a community where other people have that knowledge, like not every single person can have like the knowledge that you have, right? I don't need to have all the knowledge that you have. I need to know enough. And then I need to like, hey, Lacey is in my circle, right? And she's somebody who I could reach out to, like if I have this or that. And then either, we have some sort of barter system or, you know,
Yeah.
we spend money in our own community. We have value in our own community, whatever that looks like. And again, I think that's part of more of like creating this more holistic kind of approach and unhooking from a lot of the things that we've been taught, whether it's in health or it's in your
Mhm.
education or it's in your workplace, whatever it is, we have to like kind of like recenter ourselves. And so
Yeah.
what are some of the things that in terms of women's reproductive health, like what are some of those practices that we can do, some of those steps that we can take to, alternative methods, I guess. Like what are some of those what does that
Sure.
look like?
Sure. And yeah, and like I said, these are tools that have been used for centuries by our ancestors, by women about, that body wisdom, understanding your body. So, and I will say, um, there's only a few days out of each cycle that a woman can get pregnant. So if you're trying to prevent conception, you do have a lot more power than anybody has ever told you, I'm sure. And the amount of women that don't know much about cycle tracking, it saddens me because, once again, another indicator that education resources have failed us. And now generations of women are sick and clueless about what goes on. So,
Mhm.
if you are getting off the pill, if you're not on the pill, if you'd like to, and you want to know about tracking your cycle, let's talk
Yes,
about it.
I need to know about this. Like
Yeah.
the way that my
So,
bank account is set up right now is not trying to have a baby, you know?
yeah. Yes, you guys can be in control. Education is power, okay? And intuition too. So there's a lot of aspects of this. There are four phases of the cycle. I don't know how many of you know this or not, but we're going to look at the
No,
cycle.
I don't I know about, like, ovulation, like, that's basically in my mind how I had it. I was like, "Alright, like,
Right.
you have your period, and then, like, 2 weeks later you ovulate, and then 2 weeks after that you have your period." So, like, I think I'm aware of, like, 2 phases. But
Okay. So if you want to start cycle tracking, we're going to go through the 4 phases of the cycle. So menstruation is phase 1. Now, the day that your period begins, we're going to consider that day 1. So if you want to start tracking, when if your period is coming up, it's a great time to start. So if we're considering that day 1, we're thinking menstruation. Okay, this is our body releasing, detoxing. Our body is smart, it is cleaning ourselves, so it's not pregnant, it's shedding, it's getting rid of buildup of estrogen and progesterone that otherwise would have been there, for the healthy fertilization and growth of an egg. And this is a time to rest, this is a time to take care of yourself, nourish yourself, um, and be gentle with yourself as well. Honestly, I mean, how many of us aren't gentle with our periods because, we live these fast, crazy, busy lives and we're just treated as inconvenient about it. Try to make time and space for yourself during your period. It's the best thing you could do. Honestly, we deserve it, guys. We deserve to take a break. So if we're considering that phase 1, obviously our periods, everybody's different. Some women have 3-day periods, some women have closer to a week. I'm not going to dive super into like PMS or crazy symptoms or anything, just so, we can move through this. That's a talk for another day. But okay, menstruation is day 1. The second phase of our cycle is our follicular phase. And this is essentially the body preparing for ovulation. So we're going to see increases in certain hormones in the body. Now, usually with the follicular phase, we're moving to ovulation into our fertile window. So ovulation is considered stage 3. I'm going to go off of a general consensus because every woman is different, but the longer you track and the more familiar you get with your tools, you'll be able to identify, like, more specifically the different parts of your cycle. So you can either prevent or plan conception and take better care of yourself, obviously. So when we're getting to ovulation, this is typically around day 12 of your cycle. So, third phase ovulation. So, if menstruation is day 1, about 12 days after that, ish. Um, and that is kind of irrelevant to how long your period is. So, whether you have like a 3-day long period or a 7-day long period, around day 12, a little sooner or a little later is when you're going to ovulate. And I say that vaguely because it's not exact for every woman. This is once again like the marketing convenience of birth control. They can't keep track of everybody. So if we manipulate everybody the same way, it solves that problem, right? Big pharma, it solves that problem. So if we use that as a starting point, though, it will start giving us a good idea of what to pay attention to in our body. And ovulation, you can get certain symptoms. Some women have more, some women have less. Depending on if you're on contraceptives or not, you may experience different things. But start to pay attention. You may notice things like a high sex drive. You may notice that you feel very spunky or very creative. There's a lot of emotional and mental and physical things that can happen. Like, these are indicators and signs that our ancestors have been using for hundreds and hundreds of years to understand the process of their body and be aware of what's going on. Think about this. Indigenous cultures, the women are taught to read their bodies and listen to their bodies. So we're trying to perpetuate more of that again, right? Like, we want to take that power back so we do feel confident and in control of our health. So we're getting to ovulation. Another common symptom, some women might feel a very slight sensation on the left or right side of their body, indicating which ovary is going to be releasing that egg to get ready to,
mm.
potentially be fertilized. Um, Sometimes it's an ache. Some women experience a slight pinch, maybe for a few hours, maybe for like a day or two in that fertile window. But we have to remember, if you can figure out in your cycle and dedicate the time to track it, and exactly when you're ovulating, the small window that, can be your preventative method or, abstinence or whatever, or otherwise, try to conceive. If you're trying to conceive, this is a great tool as well. It's it seems complicated at first, but if you put the work and dedication into building the relationship with your body and learning how to trust it, it is a very, very beautiful experience, and nobody can take that away from you.
Right.
It's
And it's
very,
not like
very
you have to
powerful.
think about it every day. It's just like, boom, you have your period day 1, and then it's just like cross off. You'd be like, okay, today's day 12. Like, let me kind of be more on the lookout here for, whatever I'm feeling. And,
Hmm.
and I would feel that like if I forgot to take my pill, I could feel it there.
Right.
Right? Versus,
Yes.
like, if, now, like, when I'm ovulating, it's back to, like, more, I guess, like, the traditional, like, I can definitely feel it.
Yeah. And while we're talking about ovulation, I just wanted to bring up a few different methods you could use if you're trying to figure out when you're ovulating and you don't have a clear idea, um, and you don't want to have any whoopsies. I'll just say. So there's a few different things you can do. I do like to recommend using the Flow app as a database, not necessarily as something to rely on, but I do like it because it's a great place where you can organize all of this different information. And over time, it can give you a lot more accurate perspectives on your cycle. So, like anything with technology, we don't want to 100% rely on it, but it is a great way to organize this. So, one way we can see if we're ovulating is by testing our basal body temperature. So I have my thermometer here. I wanted to show you guys. So this is a basal body temperature thermometer. They're very cheap, honestly. They're so cheap. Drugstores, wherever. And it's usually, let me just double check. I think it's 3 or 4 digits.
I've never heard of this.
Yes. So when you ovulate, your body temperature, your basal body temperature will actually increase, but it can be very, very slight. So this is a very sciencey method, but with consistency, it can be super effective. And the Flow app has a place where you can input this too. Like I said, it's a really good database if you're starting this. Now, it's a little specific because it can be finicky, but basically, this is what I'm going to recommend if you want the best results. You want to take your temperature within the same exact like half an hour window every single
Oh my
morning.
god, I couldn't take the pill every day, though. I
Um, hear me out though, because this is very fascinating. It is. No.
Alright.
Um, and gonna want to do this before you even get up out of bed, pee, go to the bathroom, drink anything. So like if you have an alarm, say if you get up at 9, you're gonna set your alarm for 9, keep this on your bedstand. As soon as that alarm goes off, you're gonna roll over, pop this under your tongue, wait for it to read, and that's gonna be your number, because anything that you do could alter the reading. Like if you stand up and your heart rate changes, or if you drink something and it changes your temperature in your mouth, like it is finicky. But with a lot of practice, you can start to see. And what I like with Flow is, this is something I would recommend doing for at least a handful of months to get used to it. But Flow will actually make a graph for you. So even if the temperature increase is that slight, and that will usually happen like within a day or two of your actual ovulation, it'll start to spike, and then it'll stay spiked, but it is very, very slight. But once again, it is a tool. I mean, imagine if they taught us this in our sex ed class in high school, and it is kind of sciency, and it is kind of applying like a scientific method and stuff, but it's not invasive either,
Right, right.
you know? Um,
Scientific method.
and like I said, basal body temperature. And you guys too, I implore you to look this up and kind of explore it a little bit, because it can be very, very useful. I know women that have prevented and also successfully conceived
That's
using just this method. Sometimes they'll also call it rhythm, going with the rhythm of your body. A few other
I'm a
indicators.
fan of just, like, the pull-out method, just every time.
Right, right. Especially if the pullout game is strong, right?
Hey, let's go, guys. Listen, guys, if you wanna talk about what you can do for ladies, right? We talked about, oh my god, the burden's on the ladies. Just work on that pull-out game.
Right.
No, this might have to go in the uncensored segment.
Yes. But you know what though? That's a good point because when I work with a lot of women with their health, especially, whether it's coming off contraceptives or matters of fertility and reproductive health, if you do have a partner, these are great things that you can learn together because the more knowledgeable they are about their body and they can hold space for you and be
Mm,
aware of the rhythm of your cycle, it's a very beautiful dynamic, I think, in a relationship. And it also kind of bridges the gap where some people might not be as sensitive about what we're going through in our cycle. And
right.
once again, that whole like, why are we alienated from our bodies at such a young age, that we have generations of, men and women who are very clueless about sex ed and reproductive health,
Mm, right, and then
you
I feel
know?
like it brings us to this place where we are today, where we have all sorts of questionable things being injected into our sexual education classes, and it's like,
Yes.
it's like, "Yeah, we should be doing something different," but no, we shouldn't be doing that, you know?
Yeah. And it's
And
tough
this stuff
because,
is like the cuckoo, wacky, like, "Oh, no," kinda stuff.
and it's hard because, also with, schools, it's one of those gray areas where you wonder, okay, how much should be more in the hands of the parents or the
Right,
families or even the culture, depending on, cultural preferences, religious preferences, spiritual
right.
preferences. There's a lot of different dynamics about
So
sex
you can
education.
go on the radio and talk about shaking your butt, and you can make a music video about it, but you
But don't
can't.
talk about ovulation,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, don't talk about ovulation or
Yes.
sound tracking your I guess, what is it, your
Right.
fertility window.
Right. And there was another method too I wanted to talk about
Oh,
as far
yeah.
as
What do we
ovulation
got?
tracking. Um, Cervical mucus. Okay, we're talking about body fluids, guys. So if you're not
Mm,
comfortable with it,
that's
well,
hot.
it happens. Um, so cervical mucus does change during ovulation, and similar to the temperature, as you're moving out of that follicular phase and that egg is really getting ready to go
Mhm,
and prepare and get itself all cozy where it wants to be, your cervical mucus will change. So, if you've ever heard of anybody talk about like, egg white consistency or different consistencies, this happens because the body is preparing to help sperm move to
mm,
a fertilized egg.
mm,
So, even if you're preventing conception, biology does not care about that. Biology is going to do what it is designed to do
mm.
to create and reproduce. Um, Now, this not might not necessarily be a obvious or a visual thing. So you can gently use your hand, two fingers, insert slowly. You want to be careful and obviously gentle around your cervix, but you can obviously monitor your fluids, and that's a great way to kind of get up in there, get a little intimate, but kind of see what's going on. And it can be a huge indicator of what's happening. So
Mm,
for some women, this may be more drastic or otherwise. If you are on contraceptives, once again, if you're manipulating hormones, it could affect your cervical mucus, but so could diet, so could hydration. So, I mean, obviously, we're being very specific, but you do want to be considerate of other
right.
parts of your
I feel
health.
like it's anything though, like, if you start kinda paying attention to it, then you can kinda make connections, you get used to it, different things, so this has been very informative for sure. I mean, like, as much as I started to like think about these sorts of things, this definitely is giving me a lot more information to kind of continue going down the rabbit hole and also just like continue to get to know your own self and body in a more, intimate and wholesome ways.
Yeah.
So,
And this was definitely a crash course. There's a lot to learn, but
all
I
right,
do
well, we'll have you back on here. Maybe we'll get the round 2 or, I know you do a lot of other cool things over there. Lacey is actually known as that plant lady. She has all sorts of cool plants and stuff there. So maybe we'll get to know that side of her. But I think at this time we're gonna take things over to the Teaching Liberty community to do a segment of Uncensored. So if you're a
yes.
Teaching Liberty community member, we'll see you over there. If you're not, you can go join the Teaching Liberty community at teachingliberty.org/community. Not only do you get a awesome community of liberty loving people from all around the world, exclusive content, 20% off on merch, all that stuff. But you support what I'm trying to do here. So I
Thank
appreciate
you so
you,
much for
Lacey, for
having
coming
me
through.
too. Thank you.
We'll see you on the other side in a minute. And to everybody out there, remember, I love your beautiful face.
We'll see you there, guys.